The late afternoon sun filtered through the hospital window, casting golden rays across June Merritt's exhausted face as she cradled her newborn daughter. 3 days had passed since Lily's arrival, and the world still felt surreal, like she was living someone else's dream. "She's perfect," June whispered, tracing her finger along the baby's tiny nose. The private room at New York Presbyterian overlooked the bustling streets of Manhattan, a view that had once symbolized everything she'd achieved. Marriage to Nicholas Vaughn had elevated her from a cramped studio in Queens to penthouses and private hospital suites. The door opened with a soft click, and June looked up expecting to see a nurse. Instead, Nicholas stood in the doorway, his usually confident posture strangely rigid. His expensive Tom Ford suit looked wrinkled as if he'd slept in it, and dark circles shadowed his steel-gray eyes. "We need to talk," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth she'd grown accustomed to over their 2 years of marriage. June shifted carefully, still tender from the C-section. "Can it wait? I was hoping we could discuss Lily's nursery again. The contractor called about—" "June." Nicholas stepped closer, pulling a manila envelope from his jacket. "I'm sorry. I thought I was ready for this, but I'm not." The envelope seemed to hover in the air between them, heavy with implications June's exhausted mind couldn't quite grasp. Ready for what? This. Fatherhood. Marriage. The whole suburban dream. He placed the envelope on her bedside table, next to the bouquet of white roses he'd brought yesterday. "These are divorce papers." The words hit like a physical blow. June felt the room tilt, her grip tightening instinctively around Lily. "You're joking." "I wish I was." Nicholas ran his hand through his dark hair, a gesture she'd once found endearing. "I've been thinking about this for months. The pregnancy, the preparations. It all felt like I was watching someone else's life. Months." June's voice cracked. "You've been planning to leave us for months?" "I never planned anything. It just became clear that I'm not cut out for this responsibility." He gestured vaguely toward the baby. "You'll be fine. The settlement is generous. The apartment is yours and there's enough money to—" "Get out!" The words came out stronger than June felt. "Get out right now." Nicholas paused at the door, his hand on the handle. "I'm sorry, June. I really am." As the door closed behind him, June stared at the envelope containing the ruins of her marriage. Lily stirred in her arms, and June realized that in the span of 10 minutes she'd gone from being a wife and new mother to a single parent with no job, no plan, and a heart that felt like it had been shattered into 1,000 pieces. The perfect life she'd carefully constructed had crumbled faster than she'd ever imagined possible. The Uber ride from the hospital to the Central Park West apartment felt like a journey through someone else's life. June clutched Lily's car seat with white knuckles, watching the city blur past through tears she couldn't stop. The driver, a middle-aged man named Carlos, kept glancing in the rearview mirror with concern. "First time bringing baby home?" he asked gently, his Dominican accent warm and familiar. June managed a nod, not trusting her voice. How could she explain that she was bringing her daughter home to an empty apartment? That the man who should be helping her navigate these first terrifying days had walked away like their family meant nothing. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt eternal. June's C-section incision throbbed with each step, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation threatening to consume her. The apartment door, adorned with a welcome home baby banner she'd hung just a week ago, now mocked her with its cheerful optimism. Inside, evidence of Nicholas's hasty departure was everywhere. His coffee mug sat abandoned on the kitchen counter, half full and cold. His favorite leather jacket was gone from the hall closet. The framed photo of their honeymoon in Santorini had been turned face down on the mantel. Lily began to cry, and June felt panic rise in her chest. During pregnancy, she'd read every parenting book, attended every class, but Nicholas had always been part of those plans. She'd never imagined doing this alone. "Okay, baby girl," she whispered, settling into the nursery's rocking chair. "It's just you and me now." The room Nicholas had insisted on having professionally designed suddenly felt too perfect, too staged. The custom crib from Restoration Hardware, the hand-painted murals, the designer mobile, all symbols of a life that no longer existed. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother in Phoenix. "How are you settling in? Send pictures." June stared at the message. How could she tell her mother that her marriage had imploded, that the son-in-law who'd charmed everyone at Christmas dinner had abandoned his 3-day-old daughter? Her mother had always worried June was too independent for her own good. This would only confirm her fears. She typed back, "Everything's perfect, we'll call soon." The lie felt heavy on her fingers. As night fell over Manhattan, June found herself pacing the apartment, trying to soothe Lily's cries while battling her own rising anxiety. The silence was deafening. No Nicholas humming off-key in the shower, no sound of his laptop keys clicking as he worked late deals. At 2 a.m., exhaustion finally overtook her emotional turmoil. She lay in the king-sized bed that suddenly felt enormous, Lily sleeping in the bassinet beside her. The city lights filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but instead of feeling surrounded by possibility, June felt utterly alone. Tomorrow she'd have to face the divorce papers. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out how to rebuild her life from scratch. But tonight, she just held on to her daughter and tried to believe that somehow they'd both survive this. 2 weeks later, June sat on her bathroom floor at 4 a.m., staring at a stack of medical bills that had arrived like a cruel joke. The hospital statement showed a balance of $19,247 to $83, even after insurance. The numbers blurred through her tears as Lily's cries echoed from the nursery. Her body felt foreign and broken. The C-section incision pulled with every movement. Her breasts ached from inconsistent breastfeeding, and the postpartum hormones made her feel like she was drowning in her own emotions. She'd Googled postpartum depression symptoms more times than she cared to admit. "I can't do this," she whispered to the empty bathroom, her voice echoing off the marble tiles Nicholas had insisted on importing from Italy. Everything in this apartment screamed of his wealth, his taste, his control, and now it all felt like a prison. Her phone buzzed. Another text from her mother. "June? Haven't heard from you in days. Is everything okay?" June typed and deleted a dozen responses. How could she explain that she hadn't showered in 3 days, that she'd been surviving on crackers and whatever delivery food she could manage to order, that she'd seriously considered calling her ex-boss at the publishing house, begging for her freelance position back even though she could barely string together a coherent sentence? Instead, she wrote, "Just adjusting to new mom life. We'll call soon." Another lie. Lily's cries grew more desperate, and June forced herself to stand. In the nursery, she picked up her daughter with shaking hands. "I'm sorry, baby. Mommy's trying her best." But her best felt pathetically inadequate. The baby books made it sound manageable, challenging but rewarding. They'd never mentioned the bone-deep exhaustion, the way her own body felt like a stranger's, or the crushing weight of doing it all alone. She settled into the rocking chair, attempting to nurse, when her phone rang. Nicholas's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, hope fluttered in her chest. Maybe he'd realized his mistake. Maybe he wanted to come home. "June, I need to get some things from the apartment." His voice was businesslike, distant, not the voice of a man who'd realized he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. "When?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "This afternoon? Around 3? June looked down at herself. Unwashed hair, milk-stained pajamas, the exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "I'd prefer if you came when I'm not here." "That works. I'll have the doorman let me in." A pause. "How are you holding up?" The question felt like a slap. How was she holding up? She was barely surviving, drowning in bills and responsibility while he lived in his bachelor loft, sleeping through the night having adults-only conversations. "We're fine," she lied again. After he hung up, June stared at her reflection in the nursery's mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, hollow-eyed, defeated, nothing like the confident editor who'd once negotiated publishing deals and managed tight deadlines. But as she looked at Lily, something shifted inside her chest. This tiny person needed her. Not Nicholas, not anyone else. Her. For the first time since the hospital, June felt a spark of something that wasn't despair. Maybe she couldn't control what Nicholas had done, but she could control what happened next. It started with a moment of desperate honesty at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night. June sat in the nursery, Lily finally asleep in her arms, when she grabbed her phone and opened TikTok, something she'd barely used before becoming a mother. Without thinking, she hit record. "Hi, I'm June," she whispered to the camera, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. 3 weeks ago, my husband served me divorce papers in the hospital, 3 days after I gave birth to our daughter." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "I don't know why I'm making this video. Maybe because I feel invisible. Maybe because I need someone to witness that this happened." She showed the camera the stack of medical bills on her nightstand, the empty crib that should have had 2 parents hovering over it, her reflection in the dark window, a woman holding her baby against the Manhattan skyline. "I used to be an editor. I had opinions about book deals and deadlines. Now I can't remember if I brushed my teeth today." She let out a shaky laugh. But you know what? She's worth it. Every sleepless night, every tear, every moment of terror that I'm doing this wrong, she's worth it. June posted the video without overthinking it, adding the hashtag #BeSingleMomTruth. She expected maybe a few sympathetic comments from other insomniacs. She woke up 6 hours later to 10,000 views and hundreds of comments. Girl, you are not alone. Your strength is incredible. That man is an idiot for leaving you. Keep going, mama, you've got this. The support felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. June found herself scrolling through comment after comment, each one a reminder that she wasn't the only woman navigating motherhood in unexpected circumstances. That evening, as she prepared Lily's bottle with one hand and held her phone with the other, she made another video. Day 22 of single motherhood, she began, this time with slightly more confidence. Today I learned that infant formula costs more than my old grocery budget for a week. Today I also learned that my daughter's smile, which might just be gas but I'm pretending it's real, can make me forget how tired I am. She showed viewers her reality, the mountain of laundry, the fancy apartment that felt too big and empty, the way she'd learned to do everything one-handed because Lily refused to be put down. I keep thinking about the woman I was before, she said, settling into the rocking chair. She worried about meeting deadlines and whether her pitch emails were persuasive enough. This woman worries about whether her baby is eating enough, sleeping enough, developing properly. Both women are me, but I'm starting to think this version might be stronger. The second video got 25,000 views. By the end of the week, her single mom truth was trending, and June had gained 15,000 followers. Women shared their own stories in the comments. Divorced mothers, widows, women whose partners had walked away, mothers who'd chosen to go it alone. For the first time since Lily's birth, June felt connected to something bigger than her own pain. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was building something. A community, a voice, a new version of herself that didn't depend on Nicholas Vaughn's presence or approval. When her phone buzzed with a text from Nicholas, "Saw your videos. We need to talk." June stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it without responding. She had found her voice, and she wasn't ready to let anyone silence it again. Nicholas Vaughn abandons newborn and wife was trending on Twitter by Thursday morning. June discovered this while feeding Lily, nearly choking on her coffee as she scrolled through the comments on her latest TikTok video, which now had over 500,000 views. Someone had done their homework. Nicholas's LinkedIn profile, his company's website, even photos from their wedding 2 years ago were circulating with captions like, "This is what abandoning your family looks like," and "Millionaire real estate mogul can't handle real responsibility." June's phone rang incessantly. Interview requests from morning shows, podcast invitations, messages from women's magazines wanting to feature her story. The woman who'd felt invisible just weeks ago was suddenly the center of a movement she'd never intended to start. June MERRITT is giving voice to every woman who's been left to pick up the pieces. Read an article in Refinery 29. Her raw honesty about single motherhood is reshaping conversations about abandonment, responsibility, and female resilience. But it was the call from her mother that caught her completely off guard. "June Elizabeth MERRITT, why am I finding out about your divorce from a Facebook article?" Her mother's voice was sharp, hurt, and worried all at once. June closed her eyes, bouncing Lily gently as she tried to find words. "Mom, you've been lying to me for weeks. Do you have any idea how that feels? I had to learn that my daughter was struggling, that my granddaughter's father abandoned them, from strangers on the internet. The guilt hit like a physical blow. I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could handle it alone." "Handle what alone? The bills? The exhaustion? The heartbreak?" Her mother's voice softened. "Sweetheart, asking for help isn't failure. It's survival." 20 minutes later, her mother was booking a flight from Phoenix to LaGuardia. Meanwhile, across the city in his Soho loft, Nicholas was discovering the true cost of his decisions. His business partner, David Chen, sat across from his glass desk looking uncomfortable. "The Riverside Project investors are nervous," David said, sliding a folder across the desk. 3 of them have specifically mentioned the social media situation. They're concerned about associating with someone who's being portrayed as, and I quote, "a deadbeat dad who prioritizes profits over family." Nicholas rubbed his temples. He'd seen the videos, read the comments. June looked nothing like the woman he'd married. She looked stronger, more determined, more beautiful in her vulnerability than he remembered, and he was being painted as the villain in a story that was supposed to be about his freedom. "It'll blow over," he muttered. but even he didn't believe it. "Nicholas, man, I have to ask, is what she's saying true? Did you really serve her divorce papers 3 days after she gave birth?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Nicholas had justified his actions for weeks. He wasn't ready. He'd panicked. It was better to be honest than to fake it. But hearing it from David's mouth, seeing the disappointment in his friend's eyes, made his reasoning sound hollow. His phone buzzed with another notification. June had posted a new video, this one showing her attempting to assemble a high chair while Lily slept in a bouncy seat beside her. "Learning to be handy was never part of my skill set," she told the camera, holding up an instruction manual. "But neither was being a single mom, and look how that's going." Her laugh was genuine, confident in a way that made Nicholas's chest tight with something he couldn't name. The comments poured in with encouragement, advice, and stories from other women who'd learned to be their own heroes. June had found her tribe, her purpose, her strength, and Nicholas realized, perhaps too late, what he'd actually walked away from. The transformation was undeniable. When June's mother, Carmen Rodriguez, arrived at LaGuardia Airport, she barely recognized the woman waiting for her. Gone was the defeated, hollow-eyed daughter she'd worried about through weeks of stilted phone calls. In her place stood someone radiant with purpose, holding Lily with the confidence of a woman who'd learned to trust her own strength. "Mija," Carmen whispered, embracing them both carefully. "You look different?" June smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. "I feel different too." The ride back to Manhattan was filled with honest conversation. No more lies. No more pretending everything was perfect. June showed her mother the TikTok videos, the interview requests, the messages from women around the world sharing their own stories of resilience. "I started this because I felt invisible," June explained as they walked through the apartment. "Now I have a platform, Mom. Real influence. Brands are reaching out for partnerships. Publishers want to talk about a book deal." Carmen studied her daughter carefully. "And Nicholas?" June's expression hardened slightly. "What about him? Has he tried to reach out since all this started?" "He's texted a few times. Wants to talk. But I'm not the same woman he left in that hospital bed. I don't need his validation anymore." That afternoon, while Carmen bonded with Lily, June filmed what would become her most powerful video yet. She stood in the nursery Nicholas had designed, but the space felt different now. It belonged to her and Lily, not to the memory of a marriage that had never been as solid as she'd believed. "6 weeks ago, I thought my life was over," she told the camera. "A man I loved walked away from our 3-day-old daughter and me, and I believed that meant I wasn't worth staying for. But here's what I've learned. His inability to handle responsibility says nothing about my worth and everything about his character." She moved to the window overlooking Central Park, where autumn was painting the trees in brilliant gold and crimson. "I used to edit other people's stories for a living. Now I'm writing my own. And this chapter, it's about becoming the kind of woman who doesn't need anyone to complete her story." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "To every woman watching who feels abandoned, forgotten, or discarded, you are enough. You have always been enough. And sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is walk away and let you discover how incredible you were all along." The video exploded across social media. "You Are Enough" began trending alongside Dinsang Single Mom Truth. June gained 50,000 new followers in 24 hours. Meanwhile, Nicholas sat in his empty loft watching the video for the 5th time. The woman on his screen was luminous, powerful, everything he'd fallen in love with and more. She spoke with the authority of someone who'd walked through fire and emerged transformed. His phone rang. David again. "We lost the Riverside project," David said without preamble. "The investors pulled out. They don't want to be associated with the Nicholas Vaughn brand right now." But Nicholas was barely listening. On his laptop screen, June laughed at something off camera, probably her mother playing with Lily. The sound hit him like a physical blow, reminding him of lazy Sunday mornings when that laugh had been meant for him. "Nicholas, did you hear me?" "Yeah," he said absently. "David, I need to ask you something. Do you think I made a mistake?" The silence stretched between them before David's voice came back, quieter now. "Brother, I think you made the biggest mistake of your life. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Nicholas closed the laptop, but June's voice echoed in his mind. Sometimes the best thing someone can do is walk away. But what if walking away had been the worst thing he'd ever done? Nicholas stood outside the familiar building on Central Park West, his hands trembling as he gripped a bouquet of white roses, the same flowers he'd brought to the hospital the day before he destroyed everything. 8 weeks had passed since he'd walked away, and now he was here, uninvited and desperate. The doorman, Luis, regarded him with barely concealed disdain. "Mrs. Merritt isn't expecting you, Mr. Vaughn. Please, Luis. Just tell her I'm here. If she doesn't want to see me, I'll leave." 20 minutes later, the elevator opened to reveal June. But this wasn't the broken woman he'd left behind. She wore confidence like armor, her hair styled, makeup subtle but deliberate, wearing a navy dress that emphasized her post-pregnancy curves with pride rather than shame. She was stunning, but more than that, she was powerful. "You have 10 minutes, she said, stepping aside to let him into the apartment that had once been their shared sanctuary. The space had changed. Where their couple's photos once stood, images of her and Lily now dominated the surfaces. Her laptop sat open on the dining table, surrounded by contract papers and business cards. This wasn't just her home anymore. It was her headquarters. "June, he began, but stopped when Carmen emerged from the kitchen carrying Lily. "So this is the famous Nicholas," Carmen said, her voice arctic cold. "The man who abandoned my daughter when she needed him most." Lily had grown so much. Her eyes, now clearly June's warm brown, followed him with innocent curiosity. The sight of his daughter, because she was his no matter what he'd done, hit him like a physical blow. "Could we have some privacy?" he asked June, not taking his eyes off Lily. June nodded to her mother, who disappeared into the nursery, but not before whispering something sharp in Spanish that made Nicholas wince. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "She looks like you." "Don't." June's voice was steel. "You don't get to come here and play the sentimental father. You made your choice in that hospital room. I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life." He moved closer, desperate to make her understand. "I was scared, June. Terrified. I looked at this tiny person who needed me, and I panicked because what if I failed her the way my father failed me?" "Your father?" June's eyes flashed with something between anger and disbelief. "You're blaming your childhood for abandoning your own child?" "I'm not blaming anyone. I'm trying to explain." "Explain what? That you're a coward?" June stood straighter, and he could see the woman who'd faced down publishing executives, who'd built a social media empire from heartbreak. "Do you know what I did after you left, Nicholas? I broke down completely. I sat on that bathroom floor convinced I was worthless, that I'd somehow driven you away." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't back down. "But then I realized something. Your fear, your inability to handle responsibility, that's your failure, not mine. And our daughter? She deserves better than a father who runs when things get difficult. I want to try again," he said desperately. "I want to be the man you both deserve. I've been in therapy, June. I've been working on—" "Stop." She held up her hand. "You want to know what the worst part was? Not that you left. It was that you left so easily. Like we meant nothing. Like 2 years of marriage and a child we created together was just some phase you grew out of." Nicholas felt tears threatening. "You meant everything. You still do." "No, Nicholas. If we'd meant everything, you would have fought for us. You would have stayed and worked through your fear instead of running." She moved to the window, looking out at the park where autumn was surrendering to winter. "I've spent 8 weeks building a life where I don't need you, where Lily and I are enough." "Are we, though?" he pressed. "Are you telling me you don't miss what we had?" June turned back to him, and for a moment, he saw a flicker of the old pain, but it was quickly replaced by something stronger. "I miss who I thought you were," she said quietly, "but that man was an illusion. The real you is someone who abandons his family when they need him most, and I can't risk Lily experiencing that kind of rejection." The words hit harder than any slap. Nicholas realized he wasn't here to win back his wife. He was here to face the man he'd become in her eyes. 6 months later, June stood on the stage at the Jacob K. Ovitz Convention Center, looking out at 3,000 women who had come to hear her speak at the Rising Strong Women's Empowerment Conference. Lily sat in the front row with Carmen, clapping her tiny hands as if she understood that her mother was about to change more lives. "A year ago, I defined myself by my relationship to other people," June began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. "I was Nicholas's wife, then I was the abandoned, single mother. But today, I stand here as June Merritt, author, entrepreneur, and the CEO of my own life." The applause was thunderous. Her book, Becoming Unbreakable, A Single Mother's Guide to Rising After Abandonment, had hit the New York Times bestseller list 3 weeks after publication. Her TikTok following had grown to over 2 million, and she'd launched a consulting business helping other women navigate divorce and single parenthood. The most beautiful part of my story isn't that I survived, she continued. It's that I discovered I was never broken to begin with. I was just trapped in someone else's limited vision of who I could be. In the audience, women nodded, wiped tears, and found strength in her words. June had become exactly what she'd needed when she was sitting on that hospital bed. Proof that abandonment wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a better one. After her speech, as June mingled with attendees, her assistant approached with a familiar expression of concern. "There's someone here to see you," she said quietly. "Nicholas Vaughn. He says it's important." June found him waiting outside the convention center, looking older somehow, more weathered. He'd lost weight, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "June," he said, straightening when he saw her. "Congratulations. I watched your speech online. You were incredible." "Thank you." Her voice was polite but distant. "What are you doing here, Nicholas?" He pulled out an envelope, similar to the one that had destroyed her world a year ago. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest, until she saw his expression. "I'm not fighting the divorce," he said quietly. "I signed everything. Full custody to you, the apartment, everything we discussed. But there's something else." He handed her the envelope. "It's a trust fund for Lily. $10 million accessible when she turns 18 with provisions for education and medical needs before then." June stared at the papers. "Nicholas, I don't want your money. It's not for you. It's for her. It's the only way I know how to take care of her when I can't." He paused, struggling with words. "When I can't be the father she deserves. You could learn to be," June said softly, and for the first time in months, her guard dropped slightly. "She's your daughter too." Nicholas shook his head. "I had my chance. I chose fear over love, and by the time I realized what I'd lost, you'd already become someone who didn't need fixing. Someone who didn't need me." He managed a sad smile. "You were always extraordinary, June. I was just too scared to rise to your level." He started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of who you've become. Lily's lucky to have you as her mother." June watched him disappear into the New York crowd, feeling something she hadn't expected. Peace. Not forgiveness exactly, but closure. He'd finally seen her clearly, even if it was too late. That evening, as she tucked Lily into her crib in their new penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, bought with her own money, decorated with her own taste, June reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The woman who'd been abandoned in a hospital bed would never have imagined this life, but that woman had been the seed of this one, broken open by betrayal, but growing into something stronger and more beautiful than she'd ever dreamed possible. June Merritt had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is leave, because that's when you discover you are always enough to save yourself. 5 years later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of June's corner office in the financial district, illuminating the bronze plaque on her desk that read, "June Merritt, CEO, Phoenix Rising Enterprises." At 35, she had built a multi-million-dollar empire focused on supporting women through life transitions, divorce coaching, single-parent resources, and empowerment training. "Mommy, are you ready?" 5-year-old Lily bounced into the office wearing her kindergarten uniform, her backpack covered in butterfly patches. She had her father's gray eyes but June's determined spirit, and she moved through the world with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted her worth. "Almost, baby girl." June closed her laptop, smiling at the email thread with her publisher about her upcoming second book. "Did Grandma Carmen pack your lunch?" "Yes, and she put in those cookies you like." Lily climbed onto June's lap, studying the vision board on the wall behind her desk. Photos of women graduating from Phoenix Rising programs, testimonials, and in the center, a picture of June giving her TED Talk that had been viewed over 10 million times. "Will you tell my class about your work again?" Lily asked, tracing patterns on June's blazer. "Tommy's dad is a doctor, and Maria's mom is a lawyer, but nobody else's mom helps people become brave." June's heart swelled. "If your teacher invites me, I'd love to." As they walked to the car, June's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Sullivan, the civil rights attorney she'd been dating for 8 months. His message made her smile. "Good luck with the board meeting today. Lily and I will be cheering you on from the sidelines. P.S. Still planning dinner tonight? I'm making my famous pasta." Marcus had entered their lives quietly, respectfully. He'd met June at a legal advocacy event and had spent 3 months proving he was genuinely interested in both her and Lily before she'd agreed to a first date. He understood that they were a package deal, and that June's independence wasn't something to be fixed or managed, but something to be celebrated. At Lily's school, as June kissed her daughter goodbye, she caught sight of a familiar figure across the parking lot. Nicholas stood beside a black SUV, helping a boy about Lily's age out of the back seat. He looked different, calmer, more settled. She'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd remarried a pediatric nurse named Rebecca and had adopted her son from a previous relationship. Their eyes met briefly across the lot. He nodded, not with regret or longing, but with something like respect. June nodded back. They'd found their peace with the past, and both had learned to build better futures. "Mrs. June," Lily's voice called from the school entrance, "I forgot to tell you, I love you to the moon and back. And I love you to the stars and beyond," June called back, their daily ritual bringing tears to her eyes. Driving toward her office, June reflected on the woman she'd become. The scared, abandoned young mother in that hospital bed would never have imagined this life. The thriving business, the loving relationship with Marcus, the confident daughter who believed she could achieve anything. Sometimes the most beautiful stories began with the word, goodbye. Sometimes losing everything was just another way of saying hello to the life you were always meant to live. June Merritt had learned to transform her deepest wound into her greatest strength, and every day she helped other women discover they could do the same. What would you have done? If you were in June's position, abandoned with a newborn baby, facing massive medical bills and feeling completely lost, what would have been your first step toward rebuilding your life? Would you have A, immediately reached out to family and friends for support, even if it meant admitting your perfect life was falling apart? B, focused on legal action first, making sure Nicholas paid financially for abandoning his responsibilities? C, done exactly what June did, found your voice through social media, and built a community of support? D, tried to win Nicholas back, believing that keeping the family together was worth fighting for? E, something completely different? Tell us your approach. Think about it. June transformed her deepest pain into her greatest strength, but everyone's journey to healing and empowerment looks different. What resonated most with you about June's story? Was it her vulnerability in those first TikTok videos? Her strength in rejecting Nicholas when he came back? Or perhaps her ability to forgive while still protecting her boundaries?